The Salem witch trials were far more disturbing than you realized. The hysteria spread quickly beyond the initial group of afflicted girls. As accusations multiplied, so did the sense of panic. Anyone could be accused, regardless of age, gender, or social standing. Ministers, midwives, farmers, and even respected members of the community were swept into the frenzy. Fear fed itself, growing stronger with each new arrest. Religion justified the process, teaching that sparing witches meant endangering the entire community's salvation. The trials became not just about punishing individuals, but about defending the very soul of Salem. What made this hysteria especially disturbing was its inevitability. Once fear and religion fused into a single driving force, reason had little chance of prevailing. Those who spoke against the trials were themselves accused of witchcraft. Doubt was equated with guilt. The belief that the devil was at work in Salem created a closed system of logic where every denial became further proof of guilt, and every execution became a righteous act. Hysteria thrived in this environment, sustained by a faith that demanded vigilance and a fear that saw evil everywhere. The Salem witch trials show how hysteria, when combined with rigid religious fervor, can consume a society. What began with the strange behavior of a few young girls grew into a firestorm that engulfed an entire community. Fear of the devil, reinforced by sermons and scripture, created a climate where suspicion replaced evidence and faith justified cruelty. Religion and superstition, far from calming the panic, poured fuel onto the flames. In Salem, fear and faith did not protect, they destroyed. The Salem witch trials were defined not by proof, but by the absence of it. In a court system warped by hysteria and superstition, evidence was not measured in facts, documents, or rational testimony. Instead, the trials relied heavily on spectral evidence, dreams, visions, and personal claims that someone's spirit had appeared to torment another. It was a system where justice was impossible, for the mere word of an accuser carried more weight than any defense the accused could offer. In Salem, accusation itself became proof, and innocence became indefensible. Spectral evidence was the most infamous weapon of the trials. If a person claimed to see the specter of a neighbor in a dream or vision, pinching, choking, or tormenting them, that vision could be admitted as testimony. The courts accepted the idea that witches could send their spirits to harm others while their physical bodies remained elsewhere. Under this reasoning, it was nearly impossible to disprove guilt. If the accused denied it, their denial was interpreted as further evidence of deception. If they protested too strongly, it suggested the devil was helping them resist. The logic trapped the accused in a no-win situation. The reliance on intangible claims created an atmosphere where fear trumped reason. Entire cases could be built on nothing more than the words of young girls, whose fits and convulsions were presented as signs of witchcraft. These performances, whether rooted in stress, illness, or manipulation, became the backbone of the trials. Judges, ministers, and townsfolk alike interpreted the girls' behavior as evidence of the devil's hand. The courts, instead of demanding proof, validated the hysteria by treating the accusations as divine revelations. Even physical proofs were steeped in superstition. Examiners searched the accused for so-called witches' marks, blemishes, scars, or moles believed to be signs of a pact with Satan. Animals owned by the accused, such as cats or dogs, could be cited as familiars aiding their witchcraft. Everyday misfortunes, a sick cow, a spoiled harvest, or a sudden illness, were presented as evidence of malice. The ordinary trials of colonial life were recast as proof of supernatural crime, binding the accused to guilt by circumstance rather than fact. The absence of real evidence made defense nearly impossible. Those accused were not allowed legal counsel. They were expected to answer for charges that were often vague and shifting, drawn from dreams and rumors. Cross-examination was meaningless when the accusations themselves were intangible. How could one refute a dream? How could one disprove a vision? Every denial was twisted into proof of guilt. Every hesitation, a sign of the devil's influence. The accused were trapped in a nightmare where the very rules of justice had been rewritten against them. The sheer ease of accusation made the trials spiral out of control. Children accused adults, neighbors accused neighbors, and even respected community members fell under suspicion. Old grudges and disputes over property or status found new expression in charges of witchcraft. Accusation became a weapon, wielded not only by the fearful, but by the vengeful. The absence of evidence turned the court into a stage for personal vendettas, where envy or anger could be cloaked in the language of religion and fear. The lack of evidence also revealed how deeply superstition had replaced reason. The Puritans of Salem lived in a world where the devil was as real as the wind or the rain. The courts operated under the assumption that Satan was present, that his servants walked among them, and that unusual behavior could only mean witchcraft. This worldview gave weight to visions and dreams, treating them as legitimate forms of evidence rather than subjective experiences. Justice became indistinguishable from superstition, ensuring that the trials were doomed from the start. The reliance on false evidence ultimately undermined the credibility of the courts. As the trials wore on, doubts began to spread. Some ministers and officials grew uneasy with the heavy dependence on spectral claims. Increase Mather, a prominent clergyman, famously declared that it were better that 10 suspected witches should escape than that one innocent person should be condemned. His words reflected a growing recognition that the absence of tangible proof had corrupted the pursuit of justice. By the time the trials ended, even many in Salem recognized that the hysteria had run unchecked because evidence had been abandoned. The Salem Witch Trials stand as a haunting lesson in what happens when accusations are allowed to outweigh facts. Dozens of lives were ruined, families torn apart, and 20 innocent people executed, all on the basis of dreams, visions, and rumors. The absence of real evidence turned justice into theater and superstition into law. In Salem, accusation was enough to condemn, and innocence offered no protection. The Salem Witch Trials were not only a story of courts and executions, they were the story of a community tearing itself apart. What began with a few accusations in a small Puritan village quickly spread into a frenzy, where neighbor accused neighbor, friends turned on each other, and even family members pointed fingers to save themselves. Salem was transformed from a tight-knit settlement bound by faith into a place poisoned by suspicion, fear, and betrayal. The trials revealed how fragile trust can be when hysteria takes root, and how fear can turn ordinary people into one another's enemies. The accusations spread like wildfire. At first, a handful of young girls accused local women of tormenting them through witchcraft. These initial targets were outsiders on the margins of society: an enslaved woman, a beggar, a woman with a scandalous reputation. But soon the circle widened. Once the courts accepted spectral evidence and encouraged confessions, no one was safe. Neighbors who had long nursed grudges over land, debts, or family disputes seized the opportunity to accuse rivals. In a society already strained by political and religious conflict, the witchcraft panic provided a new language for old resentments. The trials encouraged betrayal within families. Husbands accused wives, children testified against parents, and siblings turned on one another. In some cases, confessing to witchcraft was seen as a way to save oneself from execution. At the cost of implicating others, confessed witches were pressured to name accomplices, which spread suspicion further, ensnaring even respected members of the community. This forced people into impossible choices: remain silent and face death, or accuse others and betray the very people they loved in Salem. Survival often meant sacrifice, and the bonds of kinship gave way under the crushing weight of fear. The betrayal of trust was not confined to families. Entire neighborhoods were consumed by paranoia. Friends who once shared meals and prayers grew wary of each other. A single misstep, a poorly timed laugh, an unusual illness, a misunderstood word, could spark suspicion. Old disputes over boundaries or property became fuel for accusations. Ordinary disagreements were reframed as evidence of witchcraft. The trials gave people the power to weaponize fear, transforming minor conflicts into life and death struggles. The most tragic aspect of Salem's collapse was that the accusations often targeted the most vulnerable. Women, especially widows, the poor, and those without strong family protection were accused at far higher rates. Enslaved and marginalized people, already excluded from the community's inner circle, became easy scapegoats. But even the wealthy and respected were not immune. Once suspicion took root, status offered no shield. Prominent church members, prosperous farmers, and even ministers found themselves entangled in the accusations. The frenzy spared no one, binding the entire community in fear. The courts themselves encouraged this breakdown of trust by accepting accusations without proof, by rewarding confessions and demanding names of accomplices. The trials institutionalized betrayal. They created an environment where self-preservation demanded suspicion, where loyalty became a liability. In this way, the Inquisition of Salem was not carried out only by judges or ministers. It was carried out by the community itself, each accusation tightening the web of fear that ensnared everyone. The effects were devastating. Families were ruined, friendships destroyed, and the fabric of Salem's society left in tatters. Even after the trials ended, the scars remained. Survivors had to live with the knowledge that their neighbors had condemned them, that their friends had betrayed them, that their families had turned against them. Trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. Salem was left haunted not only by the memory of the executions, but by the deeper memory of how quickly fear had corroded the bonds of community. The Salem Witch Trials stand as a chilling reminder of how hysteria can pit communities against themselves. It was not a foreign invader or an outside force that destroyed Salem. It was Salem itself. Suspicion, jealousy, and fear transformed neighbors into enemies, friends into accusers, and families into fractured remnants of what they had been. The true horror of the trials was not only in the executions, but in the way they revealed how fragile human trust can be when fear is given power. The Salem Witch Trials reached their darkest depths when suspicion turned into sentencing, and sentencing into death. What began as whispered accusations ended with bodies swinging from gallows, a man crushed beneath stones, and many more languishing in cold prison cells. The punishments were not only cruel but carried out with grim ceremony, turning the suffering of the accused into a spectacle meant to terrify the community into obedience. In Salem, mercy was scarce, and justice was twisted into cruelty. 19 people were hanged for witchcraft between June and September of 1692. The executions took place at a site outside Salem Village, later known as Gallows Hill. The condemned were carted to the gallows, often praying or proclaiming their innocence until the very last moment. Once there, they were forced to climb the ladder, a noose waiting above. In the eyes of the Puritan leaders, the hangings were acts of purification, ridding the community of the devil's servants. But to many, they were nothing more than state-sanctioned murder. The condemned were denied proper burials, their bodies discarded in unmarked graves, leaving families not only bereft but shamed. The cruelty was not limited to hanging. One of the most infamous punishments was endured by Giles Corey, an elderly farmer accused of witchcraft. Refusing to enter a plea, knowing that doing so would allow the court to seize his land. Corey was subjected to peine forte jure, the pressing punishment. Stripped and laid on the ground, heavy stones were piled on his chest, crushing the air from his lungs. For 2 days, Corey endured the torture in silence, reportedly uttering only 2 words to his tormentors: more weight. His defiance turned him into a symbol of resistance, but his death was among the most gruesome in Salem's history. Many others suffered and died in prison. Jails in colonial Massachusetts were harsh, cold, and unsanitary. Prisoners accused of witchcraft often spent months behind bars, shackled and malnourished, awaiting trial or execution. Conditions were so dire that some died before their cases could even be heard. Families were expected to pay for the cost of their imprisonment: food, straw for bedding, even chains, adding financial ruin to the suffering. The cruelty of imprisonment ensured that the punishment of accusation extended far beyond the gallows. Confession, while sparing many from execution, carried its own cruelty. Those who admitted to witchcraft were forced to name others, spreading suspicion and prolonging the hysteria. They lived with the stigma of guilt, branded as witches even after their lives were spared. Survival came at the cost of reputation and conscience, a punishment that haunted many long after the trials ended. The cruelty of these punishments reflected the distorted logic of the courts. The judges believed that sparing witches endangered the entire community, and so severity became a form of virtue. Executions were framed as necessary acts to cleanse Salem of evil. Yet this severity only deepened the horror, turning the courts into instruments of destruction rather than justice. By the end of the trials, the sheer brutality of the punishments, hangings, pressing, imprisonment, forced many to question whether the pursuit of witches had been a pursuit of justice at all. The public nature of the executions also magnified their cruelty. Crowds gathered to watch as neighbors and friends were hanged. Children saw parents accused, imprisoned, or executed. The spectacle served as both punishment and warning, embedding fear deep into the fabric of the community. These scenes were not only about ending lives, they were about demonstrating power, showing that no one, no matter how respected, was safe from the reach of accusation. The legacy of these punishments endured long after 1692. Families of the executed carried the stigma for generations. The land of Giles Corey and others remained marked by their suffering. The memory of Gallows Hill lingered as a reminder of what cruelty looks like when fear and superstition replace justice. The Salem Witch Trials were not merely a time of wrongful accusation. They were a time of brutal punishment, where human lives were crushed, hanged, or left to rot in prison cells, all in the name of purifying a community consumed by fear. The Salem Witch Trials did not end with the last execution in 1692. Their legacy endured, leaving scars that stretched across generations and lessons that still echo today. The trauma was not confined to the 19 who were hanged, the one who was pressed to death, or the many who perished in prison. It lived on in the families who lost loved ones, in the community that had torn itself apart, and in the cultural memory of a nation grappling with the consequences of fear and injustice. Salem became a symbol of what happens when hysteria overwhelms reason, and its legacy is as disturbing as the trials themselves. For the families of the condemned, the trauma was immediate and lifelong. The dead were denied proper burials, their bodies hidden in unmarked graves, their names blackened as witches. Their surviving relatives carried the weight of shame and suspicion long after the trials ended. Children grew up stigmatized, their family names associated with witchcraft. Widows and widowers were left destitute, their property confiscated, their futures shattered. The punishment extended beyond the accused to their descendants, who bore the invisible chains of stigma and grief. The community itself was fractured. Salem was never the same after 1692. The bonds of trust that once held neighbors together were destroyed by betrayal and suspicion. Families remembered who had accused them, who had testified, who had stood silently by as their loved ones were taken. Even after the courts admitted their mistakes, reconciliation was slow and incomplete. The memory of betrayal haunted Salem, a reminder that under the right conditions, fear could dissolve even the strongest ties of community. In the years following the trials, some efforts were made to atone. Judges and ministers admitted fault, though often cautiously, seeking to preserve their reputations. Families petitioned for the reversal of convictions and for financial restitution. In 1711, the Massachusetts legislature passed a bill restoring the rights of the accused and offering compensation to their heirs. Yet no sum of money could erase the trauma, nor could official words of regret heal the wounds inflicted by gallows and prisons. The victims' names remained in the record, and the pain they endured could never be undone. The broader legacy of the Salem Witch Trials lies in the lessons they left behind. They serve as a stark warning of what happens when fear becomes law, when accusations outweigh evidence, and when hysteria replaces reason. Salem showed how easily justice can collapse under the weight of panic, how ordinary people can become executioners, and how authority can weaponize fear to control a community. These lessons have been invoked time and again, from critiques of political witch hunts in the 20th century to warnings about mass hysteria in times of crisis. Salem became a metaphor, a symbol of the dangers of unchecked fear and authority. The trials also left a cultural imprint that continues to shape the American imagination. Books, plays, and films have returned to Salem again and again, retelling the story as both tragedy and cautionary tale. Arthur Miller's play The Crucible, written during the McCarthy era, drew explicit parallels between the witch trials and the political persecutions of his time. In every retelling, Salem serves as a mirror, reflecting the dangers of hysteria, intolerance, and the erosion of justice. Its legacy is not confined to the past. It is a lesson renewed in every generation. Yet perhaps the most enduring legacy is the trauma carried in silence. For every execution recorded, there were countless untold stories. Children who grew up without parents, spouses left alone, families ruined by imprisonment and stigma. The fear that had once consumed Salem lingered in memory, passed down through generations as whispers and shame. Even centuries later, the story of Salem continues to disturb, not only because of its cruelty, but because it reveals how fragile justice and reason can be. The Salem Witch Trials remind us that hysteria leaves more than victims. It leaves legacies. It fractures communities, silences voices, and teaches fear where trust once lived. And it leaves behind a lesson that vigilance is necessary, that justice must be guarded carefully, and that fear must never be allowed to rule. The gallows of Salem may be gone, but the warning remains. Salem was not just a tragedy of the 17th century, it is a caution etched into history, a lasting reminder that the true danger lies not only in witches imagined, but in the fear that made them real.